go rock, and that spoke to me. And at some point in there, within a month or two, Izzy had moved across the street from where I lived in Hollywood, and there was this guy who looked like he could have been in the Heartbreakers, Johnny Thunder's band, the Heartbreakers, and he oozed cool, and we became fast friends immediately. And Axl then moved around the corner from us, and the original version of Guns N' Roses, we played a few gigs, was Izzy and Axl, myself, and Tracy Guns, who went on to LA Guns, and this drummer who was in an earlier version of LA Guns. His name was Rob Gardner. And Axl and Izzy and I were keen to go out and kind of do a tour, a West Coast tour. And I had phone numbers still from my punk rock touring days of clubs up and down the West Coast to go play out. And so we booked a tour from Seattle to back down to Hollywood. So it was Seattle, Portland, Eugene, Sacramento, San Francisco, LA. Rob and Tracy weren't too sure about the tour. They didn't know where we'd be staying, and they weren't real hip on that whole thing. Now, I'd been touring since I was 15 that way. So, and I tried to explain to them, it would be fine. And but they didn't want to do it. So we called Slash and Steven. And really the moment that they got in the room, the five of us got in the room, it was really like, lightning had struck. And the five of us knew that finally, we had found the right guys to play with. And it's pretty amazing, pretty awesome to finally know you had the guys that you were going to be. We knew we'd be playing for a long time together in that one afternoon, playing in some little hot rehearsal place in Silver Lake. So we went and did the tour. We took off from LA, and our car only made it 100 miles out of LA. So we hitchhiked the rest of the way to Seattle, which was another 1,100 miles. And that was a long 3 days of hitchhiking. But we made it to Seattle, and we did our first gig on borrowed gear. And, the gig, we sucked. And we were completely tired. But we had hitchhiked 1,100 miles, 5 guys together. And it really bonded us. It was something I think that held that band together. That one 3-day period held that band together for in the bleakest parts of the band. I know I thought back to that point of like, well, shit, we did that. So, this is a cakewalk, whatever it would have been. So the thing that I think we found in common with each other was really not the fact that or the idea that we were going to go out and make a ton of money and 1 million people were going to love us. We just knew that we were going to be making the music that we wanted to make. And I don't think any of us really had, maybe Axl did, because he just thought in terms of, he saw things like he thought we'd be huge. And I don't know if the rest of us really saw that. We just knew that we rocked. And so we started to, from that very moment, write the songs, and that would become Appetite and Illusions too. We wrote some songs that were later on used on Illusions. In that first year, we were really just astoundingly prolific. It was really exciting. People have asked, like how Guns N' Roses got our sound. It really wasn't anything that was sort of preconceived at all. Slash had a really dense Les Paul, Marshall sound to his guitar, and Izzy would play through hollow bodies and kind of play more like kind of Keith Richards parts, which just happened to perfectly complement what Slash was playing and vice versa. Stephen came into the band, he had double kick drum, drum kit, and a ton of rack toms and a ton of cymbals, and like your typical Southern California heavy metal dude drum kit. And that wasn't gonna work. It was just too many fucking drums. And so it's kind of classic. Izzy and I started to steal Stephen's drums and hide them. And it finally ended up, he had one kick, a snare, no rack toms. He had one floor tom, a ride, a crash, and a hi-hat. Like a typical Ramones kit. And that forced Stephen to really sort of just sink into the groove of a song without too many extra flourishes. It's pretty obvious that we let Stephen keep the cowbell. We didn't hide that from him. And then, the bass playing and the bass writing on all of that was really just a serious nod to things like Sly and the Family Stone and Prince and Cameo, because somewhere in there, if I were to be sort of just playing single note, basic, pads for a song, it would have just been too dense. And so I just sort of naturally found this kind of groovy, funky place somewhere in the middle of all that. And the way that Slash and I play off of each other has become kind of a thing. And he and I never actually even talk about it. He'll come up with a riff, or I'll come up with a riff. And we might both lay into that riff and play exactly the same thing, even like fills coming down off of the riff into a verse or into a chorus. But at some point in pretty much every song that we've recorded together, there's a point you'll hear where we'll break off of our kind of riffing together sound. Now, it's not conscious where we break off and go on, do our own thing in the song, or even sort of the controlled chaos of a lot of ends of a lot of songs, like Paradise City, where it's just sort of this controlled, barely controlled, just chaos. And you'll hear mistakes in there, and we kept them, and just because it was us playing, and we never strove to be perfect. I think that's kind of boring. You want to hear how somebody plays and really kind of what feelings they're emoting at that point. And now that I've said that, if you go listen to anything that Slash and I have played on, you'll hear some of the things that I just said and that I'll be talking about today. Okay, so flash forward to I don't know, somewhere in 2002, and Matt and Slash and I were asked to do. We hadn't played together almost consciously for about 7 years, from about 94, 95 till